tonight's event, the Winnipeg We Want, jointly organized by YIMBY Winnipeg, with some speakers from the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association, Like Winnipeg, and Functional Transit Winnipeg. I would like to begin today's event by inviting Mark Hobo from Bike Winnipeg up here, and he will do his presentation, and there'll be some time for Q&As after his presentation. Some other important things to ensure that we make note of is the land that we're on. So the organizers acknowledge that this event is being held in Winnipeg on land which is located in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the river for Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory, and today as well is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Awareness Day, so that's certainly very, very important to acknowledge. God bless them. And so with that acknowledged and all the important stuff stated at front, I would like to begin today's event by inviting Mark Hobo from Bike Winnipeg up here, and he will do his presentation, and there'll be some time for Q&As after his presentation.
So thanks very much, Dylan, for having us all here. Land use obviously is an important topic. It relates to transportation, and really transportation, land use are very interconnected. We won't really talk about too much about Bike Winnipeg, other than to say really some of the things that we do, really our goal is to get more people biking more often. So we do advocacy, really presentations, and council, cooperating with our counselors as well. We cover infrastructure and policy in terms of what we're doing, discussing opportunities and needs with the counselors, discussing priorities, really advocating for more funding, working with participation in stakeholder groups. That's where a lot of really sort of the details come through in the groups. We're working, seeing better designs built, better connectivity, really intersections that are still maintained and working on improvements. So we want to push for working with community organizations as well, whether they're grassroots, introducing ideas and educating the public on possibilities and different options. We also do a bunch of outreach, so certainly one of our goals is to see that the bike network built up, to make sure that we have the connections in place. But we also realize that having the infrastructure is part of the puzzle, but introducing people to it, getting them comfortable and knowledgeable about where the infrastructure is, what they can get to, and how they can access it is important as well. So we do a lot of outreach activities, whether it's displays at events like this, presentations. We offer rides throughout the year. We'll have over 500 participants and about 25 rides this year, as well as different things. So it's really sort of access to destinations is the critical part. And this is where some of that land use comes into play as well. Certainly making sure that the destinations are available, that we have different opportunities as we move through. So in terms of what we think, we want to be able to connect with people, so our friends and our family, connecting with opportunities. That's jobs, education, and it means a divided workplaces. So being able to have within that community sort of that distance, 20-minute kind of neighborhood of access to those opportunities. Really thinking core services as well. So things like health, food, social programs, making sure that those are accessible, whether you're walking or biking to those. Shopping, might be goods and services, restaurants, recreation parks, recreation centers, concerts, just community centers like this So it's making sure those destinations, and also transit cars, bike share, car share as well. I am the Bike Winnipeg guy, but even I sometimes try and do something other than bike. I know. So it could be, getting that first mile, last mile connectivity in transit, so you can do longer trips without getting discomfortable. But it might be also, things like car share, having that available in the neighborhood. For those one-offs, maybe you got something you bought for just down at the big box store, you got to get it home. You got to figure a way to get it home. So those are different opportunities as well to make sure. So beyond sort of that, in terms of what's making that community bikeable, when we look to the Netherlands, and really that's one of the best examples of a bikeable community we have. They talk about 5 principles of designing a network. Cohesion, which means basically that all your destinations are accessible. Directness, so sort of having direct routes to and from the places you need to get to, rather than that sort of scattered, sort of zigzagging pattern we may see sometimes. We need those direct routes to make our distances as short as possible, but also to make people feel like they're being cared for, that the system is designed for them, not just for cars. Safety, I think that's an obvious one. People don't feel safe. They won't use that infrastructure. Comfort fits in with that as well, but it's a matter of making sure you're away from traffic, that you're dealing with sort of what we call low stress situations as we ride. And then aesthetics are important as well. Appearances and attractiveness are an important feature as well. So thinking about, sort of having that network, you also need places to store the bike, and that's something we've heard certainly. And when we think bike storage, we're thinking like, where do you park your bike? There's sort of short-term storage and long-term storage. So it's important to think for the short-term storage, it's more going out to do your shopping, go over to our friends, maybe go into our restaurants, those short kind of 10 minutes, 2 hours kind of visits that you're taking. But the long-term storage is really critical too. We have some access to the short-term storage in Winnipeg, the long-term storage, maybe not as much. And it's really important. Obviously, if you're parking your bike at your home, at your workplace, somewhere where it's there for long periods of time, it's there every day. Anyone thinking about stealing the bike knows when and where that bike will be. So having that access, it allows those trips on transit. It allows you to have access to bike to your work, or have it as a viable means at your home. So we can jump ahead one. So I think how bikeable is Winnipeg? Well, People for Bikes is a group out of the US. They do what they call bikeable index. They have the bicycle analysis tool, and it's a way of looking at those things we've talked about, sort of that connectivity, that access to opportunity and access to destinations, and thinking about sort of the variety of different places you can reach. Think of it as sort of a basket of goods, and they look at how easy is it to access those different services that we need in part of our everyday lives. And how accessible are they by bike in ways that are comfortable, that are not going to stress you out. They're going to meet those parts of cohesion, direct, comfortable, safe, and attractive to us. And Winnipeg, as you can see there, it's a 32 out of 100. So we're not doing great, but we're middle of the pack actually, because we're not alone in being not great at this. So the city does have a lot of policy. Obviously, some of these are in the process, but when we look at our Winnipeg 2045 Complete Communities 2.0, there's very strong policy in those documents that really talks about making our city more walkable, making it more bikeable, making it more transit friendly, building those mixed-use areas that mean that we have access to those different destinations within reach. And the transportation master plan and the pedestrian and cycling strategies, those are sort of in the works now, but they're well underway. And ultimately, they're what the next city mayor and council will be working at and addressing in the very near future, actually, come winter and the spring of 2023. So it's really critical that this council and mayor really move forward with those policies. It's a huge opportunity to really reshape how the city moves around. You know, certainly one of the things you can see there, that's sort of showing you growth in our roads budget. It's really been going up. You know, you look at the numbers there, we're under, you know, 88 million 4 years ago, up to 160 million here. So we've doubled it in 4 years. When we look at our active transportation, the budget we put towards walking and biking, we've actually gone the opposite direction. So we put in place a fairly good and award-winning strategy in 2015 called the Cycling and Pedestrian Strategy. It had a 20-year horizon, you know, with certain spending amounts associated with that. And we've failed every year to come even close to matching what's recommended in terms of funding in that policy. So that's sort of a look at how we've gotten to this scenario where we don't really have that connected network. But if you keep moving, you know, what do we need to kind of overcome that? Certainly, you know, it's very overcomable. You know, we have policy in place to look at really when we do our road rehabs. That's an opportunity that we have. As long as we try and take advantage of that to make sure we're improving walking and cycling, that $160 million budget can actually do a lot of good for us and really help build those neighborhoods into walkable, bikeable communities. But we have to make sure that we are actually including those provisions as we go through, that we're planning sort of that long-term forward vision, that we're thinking in advance of what needs to be done. Yeah, so, you know, really what we're thinking, what we've called for, and for the mayor and council to look at, is to dedicate 20% of our road renewals budget towards walking and cycling. That's not a figure we've kind of pulled out of thin air. It's actually a recommendation from the United Nations and some reporting they've done, looking at best practices across and ways to ensure that we reach our climate goals, we reach our health goals, and then we reach safety goals across. So what does that mean in Winnipeg? That's about $27.5 million. Right now we spend in the range of $10 million. Most of that is sort of within that road rehabilitations budget, but we're really only 50% of the roads we're rehabbing, we're including improvements for walking and cycling as part of. So really doing a better job of catching those opportunities. It's certainly cheaper to add that walking and cycling infrastructure when we're rebuilding the road. It means we're not disrupting that roadway, that business twice in a row. We're just going in, we're getting it done, we're moving forward. Part of this is as well, we recognize that within the city budget, within the road renewals budget, an excuse we've often heard is we're just doing 3 blocks or 4 blocks of this section. It doesn't really make sense to have the walking and biking. So we're saying let's dedicate a part of that road renewals budget towards making sure that we have the connectivity that we're building to what the engineers call a logical endpoint. And then as well, there'd be space to easily double the amount of sidewalk maintenance we do in the city. I think I think a lot of people, if you go down the sidewalks, you recognize, you know, for an able-bodied person, it's bad enough. But if you have any kind of mobility issue, that can be a really restricting thing to not have a maintained sidewalk. And then snow clearance too. If we could really adjust the amount we're spending on snow clearing around active transportation, around where the higher frequency transit is, that would make a huge difference to getting people moving as well. And the third part, and this is sort of that outreach aspect, getting people connected to that infrastructure, is to have something similar to our Travel Smart program. It's essentially similar to Energy Smart, but thinking about your transportation. It's been used in a lot of other cities and it's shown to be very cost effective. So putting money into that, just to introduce people to the facilities we have. Often it's the perception of danger of time that really restricts people from attempting to walk or bike to their destinations. Really providing opportunities to experience it can change that perception and get people moving. So really, that's a budget that really to encourage active transportation. Again, in the range of 20% of our road renewals. It really works at improving walking and cycling. All our road rehabilitations. Sort of really looking not for an excuse why we can't improve walking and cycling, but looking at ways that we can ensure that we actually are improving those walking and cycling facilities. And then providing bike parking. Certainly the zoning laws can really use updates. I think not just quantitative sort of improvements to what we have in our zoning, but actually qualitative zoning. So we saw some photos in earlier slides. It's important to have your bike parking sort of close, to have it visible, to have it convenient, or else it's not going to get used. If it's not visible in some of those higher traffic areas, it's a little more easy to be prone to theft. And we have a question. Take that.
Hi, my name is Leslie. So I do a lot of cycling. I cycle the whole city. For many, many years, I do all my errands on my bike. I'm actually surprised at the rating that the city got 32, I think you said, percent. I personally find there's lots of opportunity to bike safely myself. Yes, there's some hairy spots, but I wonder, under the safety or under one of your initiatives, when we host large events and when we know there's going to be a lot of people attending, if maybe there's an initiative put forward where, remember back in the day, you would park your car and there'd be an actual parking attendant person. If we looked at having, even if it was tentatively for the beginning, if it was a mobile organization that maybe at the Bomber games or big events where we know a lot of people go, if there was a collaboration with the event coordinator to say, the service is going to be here and encourage people to also bike. I wonder if that would be relevant, because A, you're planting the seed, and B, you're providing, because personally, I'm less and less getting off of my bike in fear that it's going to get stolen.
Right.
So if I'm going to an outfit that I know for sure they're not going to let me bring my bike in, and I know it's high risk. Yeah, and it breaks my heart that that's starting to set in with me, because I'm not.
No, you absolutely want it. Like your first option would be to ride, right?
Yeah, and I'm also not that person that's severely weary of the boogie. I mean, there's challenges out there, but it really is getting.
Yeah, so it is, part of that is, I think, like I said, building in the longer term storage for the residences, but you're talking events in particular, and I'm going to put a shameless plug in for one of the projects we run is Bicycle Valley Winnipeg. And certainly that is something, I think, it's a fair bit of work to put it in. But if we are sort of, I think, and actually within the pedestrian and cycling strategies, there is a recommendation to require some sort of larger parking at events. When we have the stadium, we saw when we moved to the U of M, we were doing our bike valet at the old stadium, Polo Park, and when it moved into the university, we were parking in the range of 1,000 bikes a game, and we weren't even parking all the ones that were coming out there. And in truth, for an event organizer, I think once they realize it, it's less space that they're requiring. For the city, it means some of those larger venues, we don't need, a lot of our space in the city is parking. And obviously a bike, you can fit about 8 bikes per car space. So when we do those events, it's very quick, you're in and out of that bicycle valet with your bike. We were basically at the Bomber games, we were beating anyone who tried to lock their bike up on their own in terms of getting them in and out. So it's very accessible. I think it's just a matter of finding the funding mechanisms, making sure the space is there, that we're thinking about how we do this. And then we can actually, I think that's one of the solutions certainly that would help us along.
And I would even look to say, do we do something more permanent? We're trying to get people to come back down.
Yeah.
So do we have one permanent? Because
Sure.
it's
You know,
all-
I think that's positive. You know, when you look at cities like Seattle, cities like Portland, they'll have what are called bike stations, and basically it's a place where you put that long-term storage. They'll have racks in the back, and as you hand it to an attendant, they go in. You might have like a coffee shop in there as well, but often as well they have a repair. So you know, if the bikes maybe the gears aren't switching quite the way you want them, you can let someone know. It's in there, and you've got that sort of double business built in.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question after this.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, has there been any kind of like, I mean, I hope that there's been discussion of public funding, as you said, for you guys. Have you guys made formal requests, or has that been a consideration from council, I hope?
Yeah, certainly. You know, we make the request every year at council. We've spoken to a number of the candidates as well. We've put it out in the alternative municipal budget. We'll be putting out one-pagers, and certainly some of the candidates, have come out with policies saying that they're ready to increase that funding to make a difference. So I think when we go out and vote, you need to look at what the different candidates are putting out there in terms of policy and in terms of that funding, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. Is are we willing to fund this? And are we willing to actually get this moving? Because if we hang on at the level of funding that we have now, we're never going to complete our network. Basically, everything that's built now will crumble into dust before the network ever gets completed. We have a chance to repair all the old stuff. Unless we really put an effort into funding things, we're doomed to be a car city forever.
Our presenter is from the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association, and he'll talk about that and how it ties into
Thank you. I love how we didn't try to tackle my last name. That often happens. My name is Cheryl Crossowitz. I'm Director of Programs with the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association. So just to tell you a little bit about the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association, we are an association of members. Most of our members are nonprofit housing providers. Other members include a lot of service organizations, Assiniboine Credit Union, organizations like that. Basically organizations that have a mandate to support housing, and in particular nonprofit housing. So we represent over 100 nonprofit housing providers who collectively own and manage more than 24,000 affordable homes. This is throughout Manitoba. We have approximately 35,000 subsidized rental housing units in Manitoba. They're spread out in over 200 communities, and of these, Manitoba Housing manages 13,000, and the other 22,000 units are managed by nonprofit housing providers. Support for affordable housing is very, very important. A lot of that support comes at the provincial level, but we need to do more as a city to look at why affordable housing development is important. So just for an example, I'd like to talk about some of the affordable rates that we hear about. Right now there's a City of Winnipeg tax incentive, and it allows that if you make about 30% of your units affordable, which to them is 80% of median market rents, then they qualify for tax incentives. Excuse me. But let's talk affordability. So affordability is not necessarily affordable to everybody. When we look at it, people who are on EIA are making about $771 as single. Can any of you tell me what a one-bedroom median market rent is?
1,000.
You're right there. So a one-bedroom is $1,008. So if somebody is on an EIA, right? And an EIA, yeah, applaud. I think this is a social work practicum student we have here, correct? Yay to our social workers for knowing things like that. So it gets worse as we go along. If we talk about EIA rate for 2 people without children, $1,055 is their household basic needs. 2 parent, 2 children provincially receives $1,524. Yes, they receive a child care benefit, but that child care benefit is actually meant to support the children. I think we all know that a household without children can live on a lot less than a household with children. So when we look at that, if you have a 2-parent, 2 children, and you have those 2 children are opposite sex of a certain age, so if they're over 5 years old, they need their own bedrooms. So a 3-bedroom affordability rate is $1,324. That means that's the average market median rate. So tell me how a person with 2 children can live on $1,524, not including their CCB, because I don't think that counts. I think that goes to support the children. At MANFA, we are administering a rent relief program. And the amount of people that we see who are living at paying 70% of their income or more towards household expenses is crazy. So when I talk about affordability, what I'm talking about is affordability for everybody. Not affordability for people who are making $60,000, $70,000 a year. Because you know what, those people still qualify for affordable. So when we look at it, and I think about like the development that's happening across Manitoba, in the province, in Winnipeg, and people are getting the tax incentives for providing affordable housing. But what about the people who are on EIA or working poor, who do not find $1,500 a month affordable? So to say that, I think it's important that we recognize that we definitely need more affordable housing units in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, across the country. And I'm happy to see that the City of Winnipeg has taken some steps now to look into some of the homelessness issues, as well as affordable housing. But honestly, we need to look at some incentives for really deep affordable housing development. So development that will basically take people with social assistance rates, or they will take people who are working poor. Those are the people that are overlooked right now. And in talking to a number of groups, what I've seen is that those people who try to develop affordable housing, they come across barriers. One of those barriers is waiting for permits. So for example, the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is a federal initiative, there were a number of groups who applied for it and got it, and it's specifically geared towards homelessness. What they've reported back is that they have experienced obstacles at the city level. Obstacles in paying for permits, obstacles sometimes in being fined for letting garbage pile up on a construction site, obstacles in obtaining permits and the time it takes. So if we're going to look at affordable housing development, we need to look at some of those barriers that are making people not want to build affordable housing. And that's one of them. I'm working with a number of groups right now who did receive funding through the Rapid Housing Initiative. And those groups have reported that they are behind schedule, partly because of the barriers provided by having to permit. So at a policy level, why aren't we looking at a different tier for affordable housing providers that would be a little more barrier-free? A lot of the nonprofit housing providers out there come from a core group of community-minded individuals. They don't have a lot of experience with development. And then they have the best intentions to build affordable housing and to provide this much needed service for the people. But what happens is they hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock because they didn't know what they were getting into. So we try to support those organizations. And right now what we've got going is it's a property management mentorship / community of practice with a number of the groups who did receive Rapid Housing Initiative funding. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to talk to these people and hear about some of the barriers that they experience in their housing development, including, as I say, the permitting. So my Winnipeg would be a Winnipeg that recognizes the importance of development of affordable housing and removes some of those barriers. In particular, my Winnipeg would look at the boarded up buildings and donating land that they sit on to affordable housing providers. That would be a win-win, right? We're developing housing, we're filling a need, an urgent need, and we're also beautifying the neighborhood. So that's, to me, I don't know, it seems like a no-brainer, just because it's so essential. Other things, looking at, for instance, instead of having parking lots, zoning variances that would allow for multi-purpose rooms or common areas, those kind of things. And then instead of having a parking lot, having the city, and I know they've done this in the past, they've actually gone in and a developer has asked for a permit, and they've said, not unless you work with the car share. So we have a wonderful car share co-op up there, Pig City Car Co-op. And so talking about accessibility to vehicles without putting more vehicles around and adding more green space. As well, looking at accessibility. So when we're looking at affordable housing, or when we're looking at developing affordable housing, giving benefits for making it accessible. That's just, to me, that's good practice. So many of the people that we see are, sometimes seniors or other people who need accessible units, and they're just not out there. So I think it's really important that we look at things as a whole. We look at the kind of buildings that we're developing, and we look at density. So one of the things we often see is a lot of infill housing. I'm not opposed to infill housing in principle, but I also know that, a lot that was used for, maybe 2 families or 4 families, perhaps it could have been better used if it was rezoned for affordable housing development. So those are the things that I really see. As I said, MANFA is delivering the first ever Manitoba rent relief program. And what we do is we support individuals who are unable to pay their rent on a temporary basis generally. And the stories that I hear are heartbreaking. And most of the stories, a lot of the people we can't help, and a lot of the people we can't help, it's because they are living far beyond their means. And they don't mean to, they just can't find affordable housing. And so I think it's really important that we try to remove some of those barriers, try to create policy that will really encourage nonprofits in particular to build affordable housing. And I think it's really important as well that we keep in mind that what is considered affordable isn't affordable to a lot of people. A huge segment of our population relies on the EIA. EIA contributes for a single person $576 towards rent. If anybody out there knows of a $576 unit, please let me know, because I have a lineup of people who would love to move in. A lot of the people we talk to, we say we can't give you a loan because it's not sustainable. You're paying too much of your income, and they go, well, where are we gonna go? And the options just aren't there. So we know already that nonprofit housing providers, they're doing a great job of administering. A lot of the development that is coming out in Winnipeg in particular is coming from coming from organizations that are working with people. And I think it's important that we listen to those people and really find out why we can't create more affordable housing. The tax incentives are a great start, don't get me wrong, but if we look at only providing 30% of units at 80% of median market, where does a person go who is getting $576 from EIA? The other thing I'd like to talk about for just a minute is service navigation and the importance of having a system that is well connected. In my experience, there's been a lot of times when we provide support to somebody and we go, have you applied for rent assist? Or have you applied for this benefit, the Canada-Manitoba housing benefit? Those kind of things. And they've never heard of it. And if they didn't have somewhere to turn to give them that advice, they probably wouldn't know about it. So service navigation, we constantly hear from organizations. We've got so many great organizations out there that provide so many great services, but they can be very, very difficult to find. Some people are really well connected with different organizations. Other people might need a hand. So having, a hub or having these organizations talk to each other better. Wraparound supports, that'll be my final point, I promise. Wraparound supports for people. I'm going to tell you a story of a person who was unsheltered. He made the media because of some heroic activities, and Joe Public started banging on Manitoba Housing Store and saying, hey, you need to shelter this guy, you need to find him a home, blah, blah, blah. So they did. 3 months later, he was evicted. And he was evicted because he was put into a home and didn't know how to be a tenant. He had lived on the streets for so long. Nobody checked up on him to see if he had a mattress. Nobody checked up on him to make sure he knew where to throw his garbage out. All those things. And to me, that really speaks to the requirement that we really start thinking about homelessness not in terms of putting a home over someone. It's so much more than that. It's stability. It's preparing the person to live in a home. Not just, hey, here's your house, go to it, and never checking up on them. So that's really my idea of a Winnipeg that would be wonderful in terms of sheltering people and in terms of development. So thank you. Is there any questions? Do we have time?
Yep, we have time for a couple of questions.
Okay.
Smile, you're all on
I always think that,
Is there a city in Canada you would point to as a leader in this issue?
Is there a city? BC has been doing a really great job. They have really gone above and beyond, and I think that particularly like in Vancouver, they've really done a great job addressing the need, and they have had a lot of provincial support as well. So although there's been funding that's been made available, they've gone over and above their commitments.
So you would look to the provincial government first as a leader on the issue?
Yes, absolutely. I think provincial is important, but I think it's also important as citizens of Winnipeg that we recognize the problem and advocate for it. I am happy to see that there are a number of mayoral candidates who have included affordable housing within their priorities, which is a good start. But we all know that it's up to us when people knock on the door, to have questions ready. When somebody comes to your door, what is your position on affordable housing? How do you intend to increase housing stock? How do you intend to advocate for homeless individuals? Those are all things. We're electing the public. So, we're electing the government, the politicians, and it's really important that we, we elect people and be well informed. What's important to you? So for me, obviously, it's affordable housing and sheltering unsheltered individuals. And I hope that's important to you too.
Talk about access a little bit. As somebody who has ADHD and autism, I find a lot of the times navigating these government websites in order to gain access, whether it be EIA, whether it be social assistance, whether it be affordable housing, these processes are overtly complicated and they use language that maybe people are going to find difficult to understand. Do you have any suggestions on what we can do policy-wise to make this a little more accessible for the everyday person?
Yeah, could you just recap that question?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Okay, the question was, the websites can be overly complicated in navigating. So how do we make them easier to both navigate and understand? Correct? Yeah. And I don't know what the policy is. I think, you know, we have policies around accessibility, things like that, in terms of, you know, plain language and that kind of thing. Some websites are better than others. I can tell you really quickly the story of a friend of mine who approached me and he said, you know, my mom's gonna be selling the cabin, she's gonna be moving to Winnipeg, she's on a limited income, where do I start? And I said, well, I know, you know, she may be able to apply for Manitoba housing. If not, I have a list of nonprofit housing providers, but they're all, you know, own application process. But she might qualify for rent assist if she's not on it. And as I went on, I went, wow, like that's overly complicated, like 100%. And so one of the things that MANFA is looking at right now, we've discussed it with the province of Manitoba in terms of housing in particular, is a centralized waiting list. So having, instead of you having to go to 200 different nonprofits and fill out an application, going to one place where you fill out, you know, a generic application and it links you up to any subsidized housing provider. In addition to that, what we would like to see is that registry having a dedicated staff person who's really well versed with all the programming, so that when you do apply, you're able to access other information. So let's say you come to me and you say, I haven't done my income tax return. And I say, well, you have to do your income tax return because they're gonna need proof of income if you want a subsidy. And you say, well, I can't afford to have that done. And I say, we work with the Community Financial Helpline and they can do your taxes for free. Those are the kind of supports and resources that we really need to have. And so in housing in particular, we do recognize how terribly disjointed the system is. And we do recognize that I used to work in property management for a company that did primarily social housing. And I'll tell you, it broke my heart every time a newcomer would come in with a number of kids in the dead of winter, and I knew that they had been out, you know, on the bus in the cold in winter, and you know, they're telling their story, and they have to tell it over and over and over again to each place they apply. And just seeing it in their face, like just the dejection and, you know, it's awful. So I don't know what the policy pieces are, but I do know that we need to, you know, figure this out for people, especially when it comes to providing wraparound supports for people, you know, because it's great to give somebody a home, but like, let's teach them how to live in them. And it's not my job to go out and teach people, but there are tons of organizations out there who do a great job at it. But how do we access them? So I feel your frustration 100%. I am very grateful for my staff at the Rent Relief Team. My staff at the Rent Relief Team, we've only been delivering loans since June 1st, and they've been developing a resource inventory. So whenever people come to us, they don't just get a loan, they get resources to stabilize their housing. And that's what needs to happen, is we need to have these hubs or this place where we can refer people.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone else.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe just pick up on what you were talking about newcomers and immigration, because they've got even more challenges with language and not having lived here, and even having some understanding of how they might navigate a housing system that's so really complicated. And
Yeah.
so I know there's organizations like ERCOM. Do you work with, are they a member of MINFA or your group? And are they reaching out to you for some of those or discussions of how they can help those newcomers that they're trying to house, or at least help move from their housing to other potential accommodations?
Okay, so the question essentially was, how does MANFO work with newcomer organizations with their challenges? Everybody has challenges finding affordable housing, but there are additional language challenges. We do, so IRCOM is not a member, but we do represent a number of organizations like New Journey Housing. They're one of them that we do. But we will support any organization who comes to us for help. So particularly with the Rent Relief Fund, we do get a number of referrals from organizations. And it's been really wonderful because a lot of the organizations have come to us and they're like, how do we help our clients access the services? And that's really wonderful because we've built relationships with organizations like New Journey Housing, where essentially they sit with the participant and they fill out the paperwork. So then there's not a huge, time lapse. They make sure the application is complete, that the documents are done. So we're forming informal partnerships like that with a number of organizations, including a number of organizations that do provide services to newcomers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for fielding those questions and your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Kyle Owens. I am the chair of Functional Transit Winnipeg. Thank you for indulging in my interjections. As people spoke, I get very excited. And I'm going to be talking about why transit is important, a bit about where we are with transit in the city, in our opinion, and what that means for you. But before I get into that, I wanted to thank you for something that I don't think we talk about enough. I wanted to acknowledge the emotional labor of caring. The last few years have been difficult and exhausting for so many people, and dangerous and damaging for a lot of others as well. We're still seeing the effects of the extra work it takes just to get through a regular day. Everyone is stressed, everyone is tired, everyone is tired of being stressed. It's harder to express ourselves, it's harder to listen, it's harder to care, it's harder to be patient. And I wanted to say that being here this evening and engaging in municipal issues might be harder today than it has been in the past. And I hope that you recognize that it's a little bit of extra work, and I hope that you know that it's appreciated from those of us who work in advocacy and education. And I hope you give yourself a little bit of extra space and time to acknowledge that you're doing this extra work. There's no shortage in election season of things to care about. So who are Functional Transit Winnipeg? We are a volunteer nonprofit. We work with the board, we are composed of a board, and we have I've lost my network connection, but we're going to continue anyway. I'm going to go and pause while you fiddle with things, or should I just keep going?
I'm going to say that was a great pep talk, and I really appreciate you calling us up.
No worries, I'll take it.
Yeah, you can present it.
Okay, we're just going to keep rolling. All right. So it's just us. It's quiet. So Functional Transit, we are a board and we have a donation membership model to cover our costs. The group was created 2015 after the Southwest Transitway that project had a lot of issues that meant that it was not going to be, in the opinion of the group, was not going to be efficient use of the city's money. 2012, thank you, Steve. Good, that was a test. Passed. I was involved at the time. although the concerns with that project were not addressed, the group formalized and became Functional Transit Winnipeg. So we educate, we organize, and we advocate for better transit service. So we are not affiliated with the city or the union or any particular political candidate or organization. We are happy to work with people, but we gratefully accept donations, but we do not. But we do try very hard to stay independent. So the first question I get asked a lot is, why transit? Why transit? Why do you work on transit? And it's a good question, and I'm going to start at the opposite end by talking about things that transit can't do. Great transit cannot solve climate change. Great transit cannot eliminate economic inequality. Great transit cannot transform your city into a fun, easy, accessible place to live. But if you want any of those things, if you want to make any progress on climate change, if you want to move the needle on poverty, and if you ever want to have fun in your city, you need great transit. It needs to be part of that equation. If you want people to have rewarding work that is consistent, and you want them to be able to go out there and find it, but you need them to own a car first, that's not going to happen. It costs $9,000 to $12,000 a year on average in Canada to own a car. That was before COVID, before inflation. If you want to go out with friends and have fun and go to a concert, you want to go to the beach, and you want everybody to drive, that's not going to work. Great transit has to be part of the equation of all those things. It is part of the foundation of the solution. So the good news is that great transit is not a mystery. There are a lot of problems where we can't quite figure out how to get that last stretch. Their problems are too big, they're too complicated, and they're too specific to cities and provinces. We can't describe exactly what a perfect solution would look like. With transit, we can. Thousands of cities have been running transit for 100 years. And over time, that has been studied enough that we have a very specific, clear idea of what excellent, efficient, easy transit looks like. It costs a lot of money. The fact is that if that money is not spent on transit, it multiplies in 1,000 directions. And cities and provinces end up spending that money many, many times over in other ways. We are way better off spending that money on the ground. So, what is that solution? That solution is called frequent service. There are a lot of things that come together to create great transit, but frequent service is the single biggest part of that solution. And that means that a bus comes every 15 minutes or less. 15. Faster is better, but what that means is that schedules don't matter anymore. That you can walk to the end of your street and you know that a bus is coming. You don't need to plan your route. You don't need to check the schedule. And if the bus is late or full, it doesn't matter because another bus is right behind it. And that 15 minutes is an average, right? A lot of them are going to come more than that. Or there's a minimum, I should say. The 15 minutes is a minimum. So a lot of them will come more than that. So where is transit in Winnipeg today? In 2021, Winnipeg City Council passed the Transit Master Plan. The Transit Master Plan was years of work getting that in motion towards City Council. Functional Transit was part of that. There were a lot of different people that worked on that, but Councillor Matt Allard was the one who proposed that motion. In 2021, it passed, nearly unanimously. And then just a few months ago, it got funded, because that's how it works. You get the bill passed, and then later you find out whether or not it has any money. And the good news is, yes, it has the funding, and that is from the 3 levels of government coming together to fund it. And the thing that I want to talk a little bit about what that Transit Master Plan is. And the key thing that I want you to know is that it has 2 parts. The first part is specific. It includes a bunch of overdue things that they've been meaning to spend money on for years, but they didn't have any money. So it's like new radios and a garage where the buses fit, because the buses are bigger than they used to be and they don't fit anymore. Things that they should have spent money on years ago, but we're gonna spend money on now. Great, fine. And one of the items in that first specific part of the transit master plan is the frequent service network. So this is a square one redesign of transit service in Winnipeg to be more efficient, using the existing transit annual budget. So when it's in place, it'll mean that the system has 25% greater capacity. If you've ever had a bus go by because it's full, you know how important it is that the system is capacity. And it improves access to frequent service from 25% of households to 75% of households. Probably you don't have frequent service, and probably after this, you will. It's amazing. And it's like $6 million for the city. It is so cheap compared to other infrastructure investment because it is just a logistical plan. Right now, it is not scheduled to start until 2025. That's the start of funding, and then it takes 2 years to do the planning, and then there's going to be a rollout after that based on the plan that they come up with. We are advocating to move up that schedule. It does not need to wait until 2025. They can just green light it any time. They hire the people, they get to work. If they say it takes 2 years, we believe that it takes 2 years. But we don't have to wait to start. If you want to help, you can talk to your city councilor. They're all running right now. What are you going to do to move up the frequent service network? A number of the candidates have said that they are willing to fund it ahead of time. I've talked to city planners who are not happy because it's a lot of work, and they're like, we don't really want to start right away. We have other things that we're working on. I'm like, that doesn't matter. We got to get the frequent service network. And they're like, okay. And your MLA, because it involves funding through levels of government, the city and the province have to agree, and then they go together to the feds. Because if you go straight to the feds, they're like, we can't do anything. The province and the city have to be on the same page. So I talked about the transit master plan is in 2 sections. The second section is different. The first section was specific. The second section of the transit master plan is vague. It is undefined. It is purposefully general. It is deliberately non-specific placeholder for the physical transit infrastructure. So this could include bus rapid transit lines. This can include bridges, pedestrian bridges, all kinds of things. If they got too specific, then they were worried that, I wasn't in the room, but the way it was explained to me, there was a concern that people would get bogged down in details. They're like, well, I don't like where the bridge is. I don't, this lane is too close to that. And it would be too easy to say no to. So they said, we'll figure that out later. Which has a lot of advantages because it was easy to say yes to. They also said, let's spread it out over 25 years instead of all at once. Because that is super easy to say yes to because you only have to pay for it over 25 years. We obviously think that's stupid. We think that we should make a plan, fund it, get that infrastructure in place. Other cities do that in 5 years. If they've already got momentum, it's 5 to 10 years. Very reasonable. 25 years means that no one of this generation is really going to benefit from it. All it means is that we just have to be able to find a way to accelerate that funding for the province and the city to agree to spend the money now instead of later. The budget range for this second half, because it's so general, is somewhere between $500 million to $1 billion, right? Depending on what the city wants, what the people advocate for. There's going to be many rounds of public consultations, potentially, or they're just going to decide. That's not been set yet. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not the transit master plan can include light rail. Light rail is amazing. We talk about it. Daniel is also as part of functional transit. We talk about how light rail is amazing all the time. That's awesome. Could this include light rail? No. Light rail costs about $200 million a kilometer. So if our total budget is $1 billion, 5 kilometers of light rail doesn't get us very much. It's great for one neighborhood to get to the other end of that neighborhood. But to get a city-wide network, you're talking 15 to 20 kilometers, ideally 20 to 30 kilometers at $200 $200 million a kilometer, you're talking at least $6 billion, probably $6 to $10 million. Now, look, Winnipeg is the largest city in Canada without light rail. Light rail is the future, but as part of this project, it is not feasible. So for the people who are excited about that, if you've ever been on the SkyTrain in Vancouver, after 3 seconds, you're like, oh, everyone should have this. And we should. But if you're excited about it, what we want to do is we want to get this plan off the books and onto the streets. Get it in place, get the buses running. Then we can build LRT on top of that. The framework for the Transit Master Plan, the infrastructure, includes expansion into light rail. Hamilton is often pointed to as an example, like the ideal for light rail. That's about 20 years. They started in about 2015, and they're going to have people on the bus in about 2035-ish, something like that. And we could absolutely do that. That would be super exciting. But that's further down the road. Thank you very much. So if we take 3 minutes for questions, and then we have 3 minutes to wrap up, how does that sound?
All right.
Okay. I got a baby at home, so I gotta go.
I'm already.
Steve, question.
What were the problems with the bus rapid transit that got you guys started in the first place?
So rapid transit has been under discussion in Winnipeg this incredibly long time. And rapid transit is different from frequent service in that rapid transit means that the stops are super far apart. And what that means is that you have fewer stops, and in theory, your trip is much, much faster because you're not constantly getting people on and off. But it also means that it serves far fewer neighborhoods because a lot of people watch the bus go past, right? So it tends to be for specific neighborhoods and specific jobs, right? The U of M to downtown is perfect. Winnipeg, and that discussion of building rapid transit was going on in Winnipeg like since the 80s, and in various iterations. Different mayors would talk about it. We're going to build this special infrastructure so that we have like a corridor. We're going to build this extra route, or we're going to use Pembina. And each has different advantages, right? None of them are wrong, but they solve different problems. And the current setup is a golden link in a rusted chain. It is one great infrastructure piece that connects one thing and nothing else. And it means that it does not serve a network. It does not serve a community. It goes from one place to the other place. And by putting it way out in the middle of nowhere, you have a huge infrastructure cost because you're building something from nothing and you're maintaining it instead of taking Pembina and carving out a lane. Carving out a lane on Pembina is political death because everybody complains that Pembina is too busy as it is. But the fact is that a dedicated lane reduces traffic because the density of people on buses is so much higher. It would have gotten so many people out of their cars who are now sitting in traffic on Pembina. But that's a very difficult argument to make, and the group was unsuccessful in advocating for rapid transit being more efficient on Pembina, for less infrastructure, for spending more money on more buses instead of a bunch of money for a concrete tube and the same amount of money for a bus, which is one bus every hour. Whereas one bus every 10 minutes now, Pembina would be a vast improvement in service, if that answers your question. And they advocated hard, but they were just unsuccessful.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Drive to their other drive for everyday items. And it also, building on land that's already developed, already has infrastructure, means that you're not tearing down and bulldozing agricultural fields or grasslands or forests on the edge of the city. So it's a lot less carbon intensive that way, and it is a lot more economically efficient to build on what we already have. However, that has not been the way that Winnipeg has developed over the last 30 or 40 years. From 1971 to 2016, mature communities lost net 82,000 people, and from 1971 to 2016, water pipes per person increased from 9.6 feet to 16.9 feet per person. So that means more of an infrastructure burden for every Winnipeg resident to worry about. So building more on existing infrastructure, you might have to do some upgrades to some of the existing stuff, but it's a lot less than having to lay out new pipes, lay out new infrastructure, the whole block at the edge of the city. So it's economically beneficial that way. Infill can include things like duplexes or even single-family lot splits, or just building on vacant lots. Starting in 2016, the city started working on an infill strategy, and it applies to mature communities. So that is stuff like basically anything on a grid. It's probably the easiest way to think about it, excluding downtown and South Point Douglas, which is considered a major redevelopment site. So this infill strategy took some very contentious turns in through 2017 to 2021 when the final infill guidelines were adopted by council. The infill guidelines adopted by council included things like stricter height limits, stricter lot coverage limits, setbacks, those sorts of design guidelines. So there's a lot of perspectives on infill. And you know, people have varying opinions on this stuff, varying things that they value. Some of the critiques of infill are, there's certain critiques that I, as a renter who lives in a neighborhood that is 95 or 92% renter, don't particularly appreciate. Like sometimes when there's, for a few campaigns against specific apartment projects or infill apartments or duplexes, you see these signs like no apartment blocks, single family houses only. And I think there's legitimate disagreements people can have. I do not think saying you don't want apartment blocks, you don't want renters in your neighborhood is a legitimate disagreement, though. So what I'd like to see going forward when it comes to infill policy is policy that allows more multifamily infill, reducing some of these parking minimums. You know, parking minimums might, or parking mandates might sound nice and abstract, everyone wants a spot, but what they do to well, for one, they make it costlier to build new stuff, especially new stuff with a lot of units. And two, what parking mandates also do is they spread everything out, and that is not a great environment for a pedestrian. I've walked through Osborne Village as a pedestrian. There's not great aspects like the high-speed traffic, but there is great aspects in terms of the shops. I think if there was parking lots everywhere like there is at a suburban mall, it would be much, much less friendly to me as a pedestrian to go through it. And another thing that we'd like to see is zoning reform. So in Winnipeg, we have a lot of residential areas that have R1 zoning, single-family zoning. That means that that's a cap on the density that you can build there. You can just build a single-family house, nothing greater than that. Some cities have repealed this, particularly in the US and Edmonton. And they're getting it, and some of the headlines say that that's getting rid of single-family zoning, but that might confuse some people. What it's getting rid of is single-family only zoning. So one thing you could do is replace that with duplex or two-family zoning, where the maximum you could build would be a duplex. Perhaps some might say that it would be advisable for infill areas, get that even higher, but let's just take, for the sake of example, replacing single-family only zoning with R2, a duplex zoning. You can still build a single-family house, but you can also build a bit higher if you want to. So zoning like that sets a cap. It doesn't set a minimum in that sense. So those are all my thoughts on this topic. And I guess we've had a lot of great presenters here sharing their thoughts and just pieces of the puzzle to a better urban Winnipeg. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and have a great evening and week.